Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Harriet Creates. In this episode, I will be making a miniature table. I want to preface this by saying that with this house, I've tried to use as many materials and scrap materials as possible. But for this, I did use some store-bought wood. So, yeah. I started by creating the top of it. So for this, I am using all of the leftover lollipop sticks. So I bought tons and tons and tons, and I'm still buying tons and tons and tons of lollipop sticks because the curved end make a really good shingle for a roof. And I have very large roofs on this house. So have taken and cut up a bunch of lollipop sticks, but didn't want to throw away the extra bits or the middle bit. So instead, what I have done is I have put them in a bag and decided to use them as the bases and tops of some furniture. So they will form the tops of tables, they will form the seating part of chairs, or the slats of beds. So yeah, anything that I can think of where I think they'll make a good covering or base or top of something, I'm going to use them. Now, because I need them to hold together in like a top of a table structure, I just started by gluing several in a row, and by doing that I laid them all down, making sure that the sides were all touching, and then I stuck some masking tape over the top to hold them all together in that shape, bending the masking tape with the lollipop stick on back the other way so that it creates this like fold. I then put glue in between the two pieces and folded them back to the way they were, putting something solid on top. Now, I recommend leaving them to dry for at least overnight, 12 hours, 24 hours, as long as possible. Don't do what I did. I set them to one side while I worked out a couple of things. So, this house is technically 1/12. However, it's not completely to scale that way. But I still needed to work out what size I was going to make it, just proportion-wise. So I looked up and measured the table I was sat at, and then I think it was about, like, I'm going to say like 1 foot, but that's not it. And then measured out, and I measured it was about 2.5 height to 2.5 by 3.5 width and length, I think, which would make it 2 foot, 2.5 feet up. That feels better. 2.5 feet up by 1. Yeah, I'm doing this all off the top of my head. I apologise. So yes, I measured it all out in inches. And then this is where the B&Q solid selection comes in. So B&Q make these differing size bits of wood that are fairly cheap. And I didn't know what I was going to be using it for. So instead, I bought them on a whim as a hilariously fun test. And then I kept them and forgot they were there. And now for this project, they are going to be forming the legs and the what's under support of this table. So for the legs, I've chosen this square bit, and for the round underneath bit, I've chosen this rectangle. Now, I wanted it to look as wooden and structured as possible, so I've decided to use the rectangle wooden strips as the bit underneath. So I made sure that after turning the table upside down so the masking tape was on the table, I then tried to draw out on the back where I wanted everything to go, making sure there was enough room at the sides, either side, that it looked like a table and didn't look like an immediate end. And then I just started sawing. I sawed everything and then got it as close as possible and sanded it the rest of the way. And once those pieces were all cut up and I was happy with them, I then got to sanding them so that they were at least smooth as well. So for the legs, I taped them all together so that I could get them all to be roughly the same length and also straight. And for the pieces of wood, it was just making sure that they were the right size and would slot in with the legs. Once that had happened, I decided to glue them straight onto the bit of board. So even though I had roughly cut out what my tabletop would look like, I still very much needed to sand it. And I did sand it a little bit before gluing the legs and surround on, but I hadn't sanded it properly. Definitely something that I should have just waited for the glue to dry and then decided to sand it once that was done, and then decided to do this around. But apparently we're doing everything all in one go with this one. So once I had stuck the legs and their supports on, I then left it that way for a little bit to keep it where I wanted it and to make sure it's set. And then I moved it to inside the house and made sure that there was like something weighty on it. I didn't want the legs falling over or anything, so I made sure they were secure with a weight on the top. Yeah, hindsight, clamp. Just use a clamp. But there we go. Once I knew it was dry, like I had left it for a couple of days, like knew it was dry, I then decided to sand it. And this is where you start with quite a strong and harsh grit to cut through all of the paint, if there is any, all of the varnish that some of these woods will be coated with, specifically lollipop sticks. Sometimes they are coated in a varnish to stop food from sticking to them, from going off. So there was a lot of sanding. I started with quite a low grit. Can't remember if it was like 60, I think, was the harshest. Slowly making my way down to, I think the softest was maybe 120. I didn't want a completely smooth finish of a table, like I wanted it to look like a wooden table. Making sure to take time to smooth the legs down as well. Making sure to go round the surround of the top, just because I didn't want any splinters. Once all the sanding was done, and to make sure that the surface itself was not going to bring up any dust, I decided to brush off all of the surfaces with this old paintbrush. Yep, just throwing the dust in the air. Well done, Harriet. Once that was done, I then had to choose a colour. Now, as the floors themselves are natural oak stain, I decided to go for a dark oak stain for this table. I knew the rest of the building or kitchen would be white, and based off the tiles, white and colourful, and so I wanted the table to be a little bit opposite to that. I stained it with this tiny paintbrush, or a rather small medium paintbrush, and I did 2 coats before letting it sit and rest. Before coming back and doing another coat of stain. Once that was dry, I then gave it a coat of polish. And that was how we got this miniature table. I'm very, very happy with the results, and I'm kind of eager to try and make chairs to match, maybe with a little bit of padding, so that will hopefully be a video in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.